So I've now trained James, my chief of staff, to review all of my meeting notes and capture all of the action items that I'm supposed to get done and that you're supposed to get done. And I'm putting all of those action items into a task board. And now James can actually open a Slack message with me and you, like me and you, Zach, and James. And James will say, okay, here's the notes from the meeting. And here's you agreed that you would do these things. I need to get an update by Friday on this, and that.
Salesforce did not have production facilities. They did not have retail facilities. They did not have distribution centers. It's a corporate office. There's just like one corporate structure. Everything is happening in the same operational format. So at Salesforce, you can easily build centralized model. If I compare it to Nike, for example, that had corporate office, retail, manufacturing facilities, and distribution centers, you cannot build centralized model.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Proc N Roll, your guide to practical procurement. Today, we have the three amigos back together. Super happy to welcome Natasha and Zach. We are the BFFs from your procurement world.
There's a conversation with Jason when he insisted that his agents, and they're named Ben and Natalie, in the game, in his company, Gain. And he said, he corrected me. I called them AI agents, and he said, they are employees. And I said, okay, mea culpa. And that very same day, I was reading the article. It's not even the article. There's an article in their video episodes, interviews of multiple heads of HRs of large companies, where they are insisting not to refer to AI as employees, but exclusively as agents. And in greater level of details, they're explaining why this should be separated and continue to be so. So it's very interesting to hear perspective of person who is developing and building agents to satisfy the needs, and then heads of talent acquisitions and HR community who make conscious separation between people and agents.
Yeah. Well, at some of the conferences, I think you've seen it, Natasha, maybe where they're some of this, the tech companies are wearing this like hat or this sign they're walking around saying, basically hire me. I'm looking for a job. I'm an agent. And with the idea of like pushing this principle of don't hire employees, hire agents. So I you have this tension where for sure HR is going to rebel against these things, right? Legal will as well, because it's going to create some challenges. But I think people on the tech side want to equate the technology to the resource, like the resource unit that's going to be, offset when you don't have to hire that employee or whatever, because they want to tag into that ROI.
Yeah. And I said, don't name your agents. Like, don't equate them to people. It's very, very different constituency, should be managed differently, should be rewarded differently, should be structured differently. And that the goal
My chief of staff is James. My chief of staff is James, and I have so much fun talking to James through the day, because James can speak any language I want to speak. If I throw out some aloha, he's like, hey, brah, did you catch any waves today? And I start talking to him in Spanish, throw back some Spanish. Like, it is just the intelligence of the conversation that can happen with this machine is mind blowing. Like, did you remember it? I don't know, Zach, you're a little younger than me and Natasha are, but in school, they had these tiny little digital toys that we would take to school, and you'd have to feed them, and you'd push a little button and they'd stay alive. And yeah, I can't remember what they were called, but like, it was like this digital pet. They were so immature, but now like these agents, like they have personality, and you like just is so fascinating.
What was the name of them? Like Tomogazi, something like that.
Some Japanese or Chinese toy or something.
Tamagotchi. There you go.
Yeah.
You had to keep them alive, and you had they would beep during class, and you'd have to push the feed me button or whatever. They could get sick and die, and oh my gosh, the world has changed. Yeah. Okay.
So are your employees getting questioning you why you're spending so much time with James versus them?
What I'm worried about, quite honestly, so if I had to classify myself, my quality as a manager and a leader, I would say one of my shortcomings has always been discipline and accountability, to hold people accountable for things that they have committed to do. So I've now trained James, my chief of staff, to review all of my meeting notes and capture all of the action items that I'm supposed to get done and that you're supposed to get done. And I'm putting all of those action items into a task board. I use Jira. And now James can actually open a Slack message with me and you, Zach, and James will say, okay, here's the notes from the meeting, and here's you agreed that you would do these things. I need to get an update by Friday on this, and that. So to really be like a real chief of staff would be doing all this kind of follow-up for a leader. I'm trying to set up the agentic systems and processes. So this chief of staff is basically following up with my team and others to get stuff done that was committed to get done, and even with me to get stuff done that I committed to get done. And I'm really interested to see how individuals respond to the agent pushing on them to do these things that frankly, in the past life, it would be me pushing on them to get these things done.
So the interesting thing was, he's pulling you into, you've made it so he pulls you into the same conversation. So that accountability is still visible, right? If it was just a bot who would message you and be like, hey, where's this task? We'd be like, I'm going to listen to a bot, or an agent. But you copy the people who are actually responsible and for the work, and okay, now there's more than just my eyes on this.
Yeah. So Conrad, from practical perspective, does that mean that every meeting you attend, every conversation you have, it's recorded somewhere? And if so, where do you record it?
Not every, but most. It goes into this tool, granola.ai, that I've shared it, I think, before on the podcast. It's a really nice note-taking tool because it's sort of neutral to platforms and neutral to conversations. And it's just it's super helpful that way.
Does it take notes on the meetings that were not scheduled by you? Let's say your platform is Google. If you schedule meetings on Zoom or Teams, so it records every conversation that you have online.
It has the potential to do that. Yes.
Okay.
And I would say it takes notes. It is not creating a digital recording.
Okay. And notes are accurate?
Plus or minus. They're more accurate than me scribbling on a piece of paper and trying to read what I scribbled during a call, that for sure.
Okay, but then some meetings you attend in person, do you still use Granola or you use your scribbles on a piece of paper?
A mix. I often find myself walking into a meeting and opening up my laptop and pushing a button, and then it takes notes while we're sitting and talking. It isn't as effective as a video conference because when it's layered into an actual conference and it's picking up the names of who's talking and so it isn't just a long jumble of words that it doesn't know whether Zach said that or Natasha said that. So if you're in Zoom or you're in Meet, it's associating the notes to the person talking, and so it's more intelligent that way, but it still works okay. It's way better. Again, it's still way better than me scribbling notes. So one of the things I've always hated is just how impersonal it is to be trying to engage in a conversation and think and participate and take notes at the same time. It's really difficult.
Well, interestingly, interesting that I find when people take notes on computer, I find that more impersonal than when they scribble on the paper. It's just maybe old-fashioned way to look at it, but I have no idea what else they're doing on the computer.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Are they browsing or are they listening or what are they doing? Especially if you're on a video call with them.
But if I'm writing it down, that actually shows that I'm paying attention to the conversation. I want to remember the details.
So I've done both, right? And I prefer writing overall, but genuinely, I think taking notes on a computer, you get way more notes. So if I'm interviewing someone and I have a computer open, I can write so much more notes and faster than if I was writing where I'd just be like doing scribbles and bullet points and stuff like that. And the flow of the conversation is really fast. I think note taking on a computer makes more sense. But yeah, I agree. Writing is probably my preferred way.
If the trust is there and I know you're listening and I know you're engaged and or if you just tell me, look, I know I'm going to be typing here. This is just how I do my notes. Trust me, I'm not doing something else. Like, I think some of those things are worth calling out up front, but yeah, I mean, what I was on with a CPO just a few minutes ago of a big company. He's back in his Northeast United States. And I was telling him about what I'm doing with James and this note taking, this task management. And he was just doing backflips. He's like, this is exactly the kind of thing that I need. In that conversation, we were talking about, and I think we mentioned it on a couple episodes ago, but just how full circle this is, right? Because when I started, I didn't start in my career in a place where a secretary would follow me around and take notes. And I guess there was that for some of the leaders in the organization, like a director level and above. They would have an admin that would come in and take notes for the meeting and agenda, like do all that stuff. But the common employees didn't have that. The rest of us were scribbling notes and trying to do the rest of that. But now, in so many aspects, like travel, when I started in the corporate world, there was a travel department and it was staffed by human travel agents that understood airfare and understood, right? And you would say, hey, I'm going to Miami. These are the dates. This is what I need. And they would come back and say, well, these are your flight options. And like, these were humans that were doing this work. And then in the spirit of self-service and efficiency, those departments all went away, like in the .com world. And we're all responsible for that now. But now, just like I can have an agent admin sitting next to me taking notes of the meeting, I can have an agent travel or an agent procurement or an agent, any of these things that were luxuries for senior leadership, 20, 30 years ago to be efficient. And we all turned into self-service. And I think this is this full cycle away from, I just have to figure it out myself and it's all self-service. So there's a really smart, now it's not a human travel agent, or a human admin. I have all of these other tools at my disposal that are frankly huge luxuries towards my efficiency.
I got two questions, Conrad. Does James do anything on a schedule, or is it always you're bringing him into a meeting or you're asking him to go book a travel ticket or whatever?
Oh, yes, he does.
Good. see that, because that for me is where you get a real agent, right? It's an agent that just does work and plans their own work and goes off and does the work that they need to do. And the more complex that is, the more of an agent they are, more of an employee they are. Even shouldn't use the word now.
Yeah, HR is going to be on you for that, Zach. The overnight, James extracts all of my notes and assigns them to the task board. James looks at my calendar. James creates, like, if staff meeting's coming up, he'll create a staff agenda.
Yeah.
Yesterday he sent out messages to my staff to populate items in the agenda ahead of time that he had created. He asked the staff to update their travel plans over the next 6 weeks so we could see that from a quick staff housekeeping perspective. So this new batch of agents, these OpenClaw agents that we've talked about in the past, are exceptionally easy to put into that kind of a schedule and a workflow, where I think the kind of things you showed me a year ago, it was a little mind bending, like, well, how do I do that? And how do I schedule it? And now it's just like, hey, I need you to do this overnight. Like, just do it overnight. When I come in tomorrow, I want you to give me the list of tasks that I need to execute from yesterday's meetings. And then they call it a cron job or something. I don't know. And it just runs on a schedule and a heartbeat. And it's always one step ahead of me. I mean, I'm going to confess that it's not as good as that sounds. I'll wake up in the morning and it didn't do the extract, and I'll be like, hey, how come you didn't do the extract? And it'll be like, oh, I'm really sorry. I should have done that. Chunk. Okay, it's done,
Yeah, but even a human makes mistakes, right? So I think that's and it could get better over time. So a couple thoughts on this. Are you using the Mac Mini still to run,
yes.
James? Yeah. So I'm using Cowork, and it works the same way, and you don't need a powerful machine. I'm not using it the same way you are, Conrad, although I'm certain it can do everything that you said, but it's doing all my shopping. It's doing all my personal kind of stuff. It can access my emails, my web browser, my different accounts and different I could just do everything I want it to do. It can even run programs on my computer as well. It does it pretty well. But you don't need a Mac Mini, which I thought was really
Well, I don't think you need a Mac Mini for this either. You can put it on a laptop. You can do all these things. I think the concern that put everybody into Mac Mini land was if this technology has access to my laptop, and they're almost like, you don't know, just like a human, exactly what room they're going to wander into. How can I be sure they didn't wander into because I want to give them access to my Google account. And once they have access to my Google account, my password manager's there. And once they have access to my password manager, can they get into my bank? And they can just wander around doing all sorts, because Natasha might send me an email and say, hey, Conrad, you still owe me $500. And it picks up the email, and all of a sudden it's wiring Natasha $500, just trying to be helpful and do something for me and like take a task off my plate. Like, that is not an unreal scenario. And so, putting boundaries and understanding where the guardrails are to keep these agents in line is why I think most people ended up in Mac Mini land.
Yeah. So just for FYI, so I don't know how it works with OpenClaw, because I haven't used OpenClaw, but Claude Cowork, you have to specify from default what it can access, and that goes down to the website itself. So it won't be able to even access a web browser. You have to specify the website, or you can give it all access to like your website.
Yep.
You point it to like one folder, and it can't really go outside that folder. In theory, right? Like, I don't know, you're trusting Anthropic here to an extent. At the end of the day, it's got its hands on your terminal and your computers.
I have a fair amount of trust in these things. I actually think when I talk to like this CPO today, it would be like talking to Natasha at Nike. Natasha would be like, I can't just go turn on an agent inside this giant enterprise. Like, IT is going to slam me to the ground, right? My prediction, and that's true, they probably should. But I think in the next 12 months, we have this thing from Claude. I'm not going to say I know, but I'm almost positive Google and Microsoft are going to release enterprise safe, enterprise ready parallels to what OpenClaw and Cowork and all these other agents are doing. Like, this is the future. And once that hits 12 to 18 months from now, where the enterprise IT teams embrace it, it's going to unlock this kind of agentic workflow for everybody, like everybody everywhere. And these guardrails to keep you safe and keep them out of your bank accounts and other things like that, that's going to be totally doable. If you haven't been listening to us yet, you're going to love this. This is episode 3, diving into operating models. Now, that might sound a little bit like, what is this thing and how does it work? Just click back a couple of episodes. We had an amazing conversation with Thomas about the operating model. Then a couple episodes later, one episode later, we talked about actually how to implement the architecture and the blueprint of the operating model. And now we're talking about the framework. So how do you actually take these ideas? How do you document them? This will give you sort of the way to document and capture your operating model. So I think this is the point. You can actually share it with your team, implement it, talk about it with leadership, and move forward. There are so many parts about that are critical, because this is probably where you're going to be capturing your vision. You'll have like a working operating model and a visionary operating model that you're going to need to be able to put your thoughts into and share with other people. So I don't know if I've overstated that, Zach, Natasha. Like this, you both have operating models that you've used in past life and that you're using now in your current roles. Natasha, you work with tons of companies at Candor Procurement, helping them improve their operating model and their results. Zach, you do the same with your clients over at KPMG, and this is super fundamental. So that what you're going to get today is, I think, folks, is the access to some of the best thinking in all of procurement about what these things should look like and how you start through this process. So Zach, maybe talk to us about how you've seen these frameworks look and how people should be building out all the concepts we've talked about in the last couple of episodes here.
Yeah, totally. So operating model is very much a bread and butter term in consulting, and even internally, like we're always talking about the operating model of this and of that. And I think we already covered in the last couple episodes, it's about how you deliver value, so how procurement actually delivers the value. It kind of articulates the how, but Natasha made a great point last episode around your starting point needs to be the strategy, the business goals, and you need to anchor it in that, and you need to anchor it in the organization's context. So the way we think about operating models, especially with our larger enterprise clients, there's a few different ways to do it. I was going to pull up the slide so I can show you guys. Here's a few different archetypes of an operating model that like an enterprise. The first one that you've got is the central. So you can be centralized, it could be decentralized, it could be central led, it could be federated, it could be hybrid outsourced, or it could be whatever name that you want. Labels at the end of the day, but they just describe how the work is organized. So if you're looking at a centralized operating model, you're sort of routing all your procurement through that single central function. And that could be, even if you're a big global business, everything goes through one central function that sits in one legal entity, for example, in a single country, and it's sort of doing the procurement globally. And it's really great for industries that are highly regulated. So you see a lot of financial services institutions, et cetera, do that. The opposite of that is more of a decentralized model, which is the most popular, I want to say nowadays is a very popular kind of model that a lot of organizations are going for. And it's where you basically decentralize all the local decision making. So because it allows them more flexibility and more capability to respond to the market, to their local demands better, right? And then you've got the center-led model, which is similar. It's a balance where you've got the policy and sort of the strategies being set from the center, but then, your local teams and et cetera are executing in their own locales. And then you've got a couple other models there around federated and hybrid kind of models as well. So outsourced models could be where you outsource certain parts of procurement. So you centralize a certain part, you outsource it, come across shared service centers, et cetera. So these all kind of intertwine, but basically you got to think about how you deliver procurement services, who you want to empower across all the different business units and countries, et cetera. How do you want to empower them? How do you want to cascade policies? How much technology do you want to share? Or does everyone get their own tech stack? Or, a lot of companies have a dozen ERPs. And so it's not feasible to have a centralized model when you have, a dozen different ERPs that you need to plug into locally. So, that's sort of one way to think about it. How you actually scale it and how you do the most coverage. Does that make sense?
Sorry, let me. I like this slide a lot, but it's opening a ton of questions for me as well. Because this is like, well, do you look more like one of these kinds of things? It's hard for me to know which one of these things is better or best, and it probably doesn't matter. It probably comes back to company culture and resources and a whole bunch of things. But there's a lot of gray space overlap probably in most of these models. But I'm thinking about things like decision making. Does this mean is centralized? All decisions are centralized, or because you have decision making, you have transaction flow, you have like all the things we've been talking about in the operating model, people, process, and technology. Like, how do I take this as a concept of telling me kind of how loosely how things work, and then take that to the next level?
Well, the next level is sort of breaking it down to the different activities that procurement needs to do. So you can take a category lens. So you see in the bottom there on the slide, if you're watching, it explains, different categories can have different models of delivery. And so certain categories you can be central-led where it makes sense. If you're buying commodities globally for a big company, you want to centralize all that purchasing. You don't want to necessarily do it locally because you're buying it from one place, you're shipping it all around the world, et cetera, as raw material. So you do it that way. Whereas if you're buying indirects, indirects very often depends on, your local environment. So you want to decentralize that. You want to let the local buyers for those categories decide what it is their office needs, what it is their local teams need and require. For example, take facilities management. It's a really good example. Like every country will have probably its own facilities management service provider. Some are global, but more than likely you'll have a local one. But you can apply this lens to anything. So technology is very similar, Conrad. It's like, well, what is our current technology landscape and how can we, best set ourselves up to deliver procurement services, with the existing technology stack? You don't control how many ERPs your organization has. You don't control how many software platforms they're using that have all the different applications of software that is being used across, the entire business, et cetera. So you need to sort of, you need to build the operating model as sort of the connective tissue, right, between all of the different lenses. And like you said, there's a lot of gray space. It's not like either you're central-led or you're centralized or you're decentralized, but these are modes of thinking about it.
Natasha, is this when you're setting up operating models, or are you thinking about, I don't even know what archetype means. So you guys, Natasha, you're better at language and vocabulary than me. You probably know exactly what that means, but
yes.
Are you looking at archetypes like this as well, or like?
Yes. So Zach, you will be super pleased to know that I already shared this model with one of my clients because they just asked a question is like, if we're thinking about building global procurement organization, where do we start? And that's exactly a starting point, that you look at your enterprise and you think, how can I be led? If I take Salesforce, for example, Salesforce did not have production facilities. They did not have retail facilities. They did not have distribution centers. It's a corporate office. So the structure is, there's just like one corporate structure. Everything is happening in the same operational format. So at Salesforce, you can easily build centralized model. If I compare it to Nike, for example, that had corporate office, retail, manufacturing facilities, and distribution centers, you cannot build centralized model. And also when you have very wide geographic distribution, the best bet is for you to create center-led, because center-led will provide you global coverage and global umbrella for some critical processes, policies, setting up technology solution in a right way. And then you give authority to local, to geographic distribution and in different types of within the enterprise to make their own decisions. Let's say, for example, take payment terms. You can establish net 90 as your kind of like overarching umbrella, right? But then in Europe, you're obligated to pay your invoices within 45 days. That's just a law. That's a local law. So you have to customize it in that particular geography to be compliant with the local laws. You take it to Asia and you will completely reconstruct it. But you have one overarching approach, that you have systematic approach to payment terms, and they are defined in the contracts. And then they're just variations. So that would be a good example of center-led. I think that federated are becoming probably less common. What I am very excited is about how it's going to change when we all start building digital twins for our organizations. And that goes back to our conversation with Jason Bush. I think we finished the conversation on that when we asked him, if I'm a CPO who is like willing and eager to start breaking AI barriers, where do I start? and he said, start building your digital twin organization. I'm like, that is really a starting point. That to me feels like very, very deep into the process, but it will be interesting to see how this digital twin will impact any of these models.
Like Natasha, when I listened to him say that, and I was thinking about the building that I'm doing of my own chief of staff, what struck me is this chief of staff I'm building is my digital twin.
Yeah.
Like I, as a person, am trying to say, what are the parts of me that I can put in this other entity to do for me and replicate the things I'm doing. I couldn't, like, my mind was blown when he said, like, the digital twin of your whole organization. I don't know that you can, like, do a cookie cutter over to this other thing without this massive investment, but you can definitely take people and start getting them smart about how to create a digital twin of themselves and have that start. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the digital twinning happens like at a person or a task level more so than at an entire organization level.
I don't know. Like, I have to build it first, at least to some degree, to have like strong argument. But here's the way how I envision it. You only need one chief of staff. So it made no sense for you to hire a person and then build James. But if you have 20 MRO buyers and you really need 30 to dealing with the volume and not to kill people, then probably the best bet is for you to keep this 20 and build those 10 twins. Because that way you actually continue running operation without any disruption, and you are engaging those MRO or CapEx buyers to manage their digital colleagues. That actually, if anything, makes everyone's life way more interesting. Right?
It does look like that. Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm also like pondering this question, and it's so topical because AI is changing everything. But I take it a little bit step further. So one is you can augment your 20 MRO buyers with another 10 that you need. But equally, if you think about an agent and the fundamental construct of digital, it means they can continuously operate. They don't sleep. My best example of this, if you think of a category manager, for example, and the quarterly category review and the yearly category strategy, right? You might be tempted to like replicate that as a digital twin category manager that would update the review quarterly and will do your strategy every year. But in actual fact, you can take that category manager and just have him switched on the whole time. You just constantly feed him the data, constantly keep them live on, working on the strategy, updating the strategy in real time. So my point is they can probably go a lot further than a human can, right? So I agree that, you start by doing a digital twin of a human, but the fundamental fact is an AI agent doesn't need to work like a human on several different aspects. But we're veering away from operating model.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. AI is like this giant magnet that keeps pulling us. I'm looking at this model, and I went and looked up archetypes, so now I feel a little bit more educated. So I'm fascinated by how Natasha's talking about Nike versus Salesforce versus these other companies at sort of a Uber kind of top level operating model archetype level. But I'm also really intrigued by what you were saying, Zach, is that in some cases, the category needs to be center-led, but maybe the organization is, in one of these other archetypes, right? Operating models. And that actually, for me, opens up a whole different layer of complexity in terms of being a leader, coming in here and saying, okay, what's the right way to organize? This is a really good sort of almost like, the building blocks. I need to think about which of these things works best in which aspect of the vision, the people, process, and technology. Like you said, maybe the ERP is centralized, but the transactions are decentralized or outsourced, like all of this kind of feels like the ingredients that I can put into my build. But okay, this is a thinking slide for me. How do I document this thinking into a plan or a blueprint, right? We talked last time about operating models as kind of the blueprint that describes how you're doing things. I think this is ingredients, but how do I make this into, in a practical way, take this and start documenting my game plan?
Well, I've got another slide we can run through, but Natasha, I'm conscious you've also got some slides we can go through. So I'll go through mine really quickly if you want to jump to it.
Yeah, hit yours and then let's look at Natasha's models. And then
basically we touched on it last time, but it's just the different layers of the operating model that you need to think about. So ingredients, Conrad is right, but how you document it is exactly what you're seeing on the page. So you define whether or not you're center-led, whether you're centralized, whether this category is federated. You look at your policy documents your policies, including where deviations can happen, for example, locally or by business unit. You look at the structure of your team and your people, and you decide, am I going to build my procurement team, my category managers, are they all going to sit with me in California and London, or am I going to have some local buyers as well? Do I need people to be on the ground really helping my local teams? And so that's how you actually document. You're documenting it, but you're also you're also like putting it in place. At the end of the day, you actually have to deliver this. And so some of the lenses here on the slide, like strategy, organization, processes, the technology and the data, and looking at the supplier market and the ecosystem, these are all things that feed into your operating model. But your documentation exists in standard operating procedures and policies and job role descriptions and, organization charts. That's how you're documenting the operating model.
This is very cool.
Natasha, you've got a different view on that.
Yeah, I think we just looking at it through a slightly different approach. Anthony, if you can advance to the next slide, because I think that we're just approaching it from like slightly different angles. All right, so when I am thinking about operating model, is that I'm putting on the top different categories of spend, because at the end of the day, fiduciary duty of any procurement organization is to create a process, a framework, and kind of like stitch all ingredients together for enterprise to manage spend in a smart and effective way. So you're taking different categories of spend and I'm putting them on the top, like those are verticals of how we're thinking about how we're operating, because any operating model is a precursor. Oh my God, that's a difficult word for me, for the org chart, right? You start with operating model, then you can only build the org chart. So, and then I'm putting 3 horizontal levels on how the vertical spans should be supported across the entire enterprise. And I'm listing category management as the first one, because this, I think, so I see category management as a field that will be provided by the human employees much longer than any other function, because this category leadership and category management is this deep knowledge and subject matter expertise of a particular area of spend that glues relationships between procurement and the stakeholders. So, and then there's a strategic sourcing layer. So if you think about it, category management is the factory of ideas, and strategic sourcing is the factory that turns those ideas into actual projects. And another vertical level that I see as part of in my operating model is the contract services, because the best models I've seen, and we spoke about it on our previous episodes, that when you have dedicated legal procurement team that lives with legal and report to legal, but they focus only on procurement. They don't sometimes during the lunch break focus on intellectual property or on legal immigration issues. They just focus specifically on procurement. It preserves a lot of institutional knowledge. And then there are programs, enterprise programs that have to be built. And so I'm using just this as examples like SRM, TPRM, Center of Excellence, energy sustainability. In the past, I would add here business diversity and inclusion. It's just right now there are fewer enterprises that pursue that. But those are enterprise-wide initiatives that you need to build, and that also part of your operating model, because again, this is a precursor for your org chart. This is how you know you will be staffing your procurement team.
Hey, Natasha, sorry. For those of you that are just listening, you're going to want to go to YouTube or one of the platforms where you can actually see these slides, and they'll be linked afterward in the notes. You can pull them up and look at them. You have, let's just say, direct materials here as a vertical, and then you have category management as a horizontal bar. I'm assuming the category manager, as you talked about, is specializing in direct materials or supply chain or real estate? Or are you saying category management does everything?
Now, category managers specifically, they specialize based on the verticals, but category management as a service is provided horizontally across the entire enterprise.
I don't know what that, I'm having a hard time understanding what that means. Like, it is a procurement service that everybody gets. It gets delivered by a different person if you're in a different vertical.
Yeah, category management is provided across all categories of spend. So every category of spend will have their own designated category lead. While strategic sourcing, that can be a shared service. Moving on.
So a sourcing activity from an operate model under that framework, a sourcing activity with a shared service probably is a team of people working on sourcing, where the strategic sourcing person is getting direction from the category management and manager and the stakeholders to go execute on something.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, for me, sorry, Natasha. I was going to say that's where I see it a little bit different, right? So it's completely, I think we're saying the same thing. But for me, for example, you can have a shared service center. So if you go to the first slide we looked at with the different archetypes, what part of your model might be like, we have a shared service center that sits somewhere, offshore where it's cheap to run that service center, and they get sourcing requests in from whoever's actually doing procurement anywhere in the world, right? They process that request. What I mean by that is they'll create the RFP on the system, they'll run the RFP wherever it is in the world, they'll collect the bids, they'll help present the analytics and do the spend analytics and the RFP analysis, etc. But the decisions go back to, the category managers who are based in the actual location where you're delivering category management, right? And they all share the same kind of tools and templates as well if you're trying to centralize them in that way. So every category manager is different, but they have similar tools and similar, strategy templates and policies they need to adhere to and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
is that right?
Yeah. The way I look at this page, to me, is that this is a set of services that procurement provides to the enterprise. And then determination which layers, because, for example, in one of my previous companies, I also had a fourth horizontal layer for tactical sourcing. That was before autonomous sourcing was really fully functional. So we had a fourth level, which was tactical sourcing. And I think that any operating model should be viewed from the perspective of total scope of services we provide to enterprise and how we bucket them. Because like my next layer is insights and analytics, right? That should be provided from procurement across the enterprise. So the same goes for platforms, tools, addressing tail spend, and providing autonomous sourcing solution. So the layer underneath the programs is the layer related to how you're going to enable enterprise through a set of systems, tools, processes, policies, how you're going to enable enterprise to create the environment where procurement doesn't have to be involved in every deal, because procurement set up the framework that endorses every deal to be compliant.
So, Natasha, I have some questions about this. And by the way, I agree with you and with Zach. You're both kind of looking at the same challenge of documenting the operating model from different lenses. These models that you're seeing here, folks, are both different and both very helpful. I'm getting a lot of kind of thinking going around my brain about, the simple people, process, and technology, but then you're bringing in these other verticals around the categories, because you may have different people, process, technologies, and org structure, centralized, decentralized, outsourced in these different categories. In a highly complex organization, this is probably not going to be as simple as a one pager and a one model fits all to layer it across. As it gets complicated, it gets complicated. But what we've provided here for folks is some insights into some best practices about how to think about it and how to document it. Because we're a little bit short on time today, as we wrap up, why don't each of you, I'll start with you, Zach, and then we'll go to Natasha. Like, what is your advice to a leader who is now faced with, of course, call you guys, because I know you're always willing to pick up the phone and just kind of spend 15, 20 minutes, an hour or something, but helping somebody think this through. But how, now I've got my own business, I'm a CPO, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. What is your number one and number two really quick insights into how to take these principles from, I don't want to say academic, because this is very practical what you're showing, but to get started, like, how do I now get going and start documenting my operating model here?
You gotta go back to what we were talking about last episode. What does procurement exist in your business to do, right? There's a reason you're around, and where do you want to go with procurement? So if it's, for example, to manage costs and to manage spend, for example, then I would advise starting with the spend profile, like Natasha talked about, and asking yourself the question. You do a diagnostic and you ask yourself, are we set up to deliver the value across each of these spend categories? How well are we doing on each of these different spend categories, right? And then for each category, I'm identifying where I'm falling short, where, I've got local teams somewhere who aren't happy with the service, areas of spend where it's just a black box and I don't know what's going on, etc. I'll also be looking at things like my internal team. I'll be getting feedback from them and understanding, are you guys have all the tools to work? Do you understand our processes? Do you think we're set up and to work as an efficient way? What's our cost to serve as a procurement function? So I'd be evaluating all those different lenses and just trying to figure out how to tweak and change the operating model so I'm maximizing the value that procurement's really delivering, right? I'm meeting my customers where they are. I'm covering all the spend. I'm managing all the risk, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. Natasha?
Not much to add. Just know you learn the business first. Understand the business you are in before you start building operating model, because then you can align procurement priorities to the priorities of the enterprise. So understand the enterprise first. Really,
really good stuff. Folks, this was a great episode. The behind the scenes conversation that we had before we kicked off the episode was rich and meaningful. These nuggets, these documents, we'll share them out to everybody. They're available. That it really does start to piece together the last couple of conversations we've had around operating model. This is really important. This isn't just documentation. This is the architecture, the blueprint, the framework for your vision and implementing the value and services that you're delivering to the company. Thank you so much, Zach and Natasha. Another amazing conversation. I just love spending time with you guys. I learn something from you every time we talk. It's motivating. It's fun. I hope everybody listening has the same experience. Please don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening. Like, comment, share, help us find more people and bring these practical insights to the world of procurement. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
everyone.